You know, the United States thinks of itself as the most advanced country on the face of the earth. If that's true, they should be able to accept a black priest. If they have never seen one, well, then they have to see one now. Tolton's mother was worth $50. And little Tolton, who was a boy of 9 at the time, was marked at $25. She saw these dealers coming around looking at everything and bidding on everything, including the slaves. Her husband had already went off to fight in the war on the Union side. He died of dysentery at a camp in Arkansas. It was the farm where he grew up in his boyhood until his mother took the escape. They were caught by some Confederates near Hannibal, Missouri. There were some Union troops who came upon the scene and reminded the slave catchers that they were standing on Union soil. So the Confederates had to back off, but they didn't back off entirely. And they found, just by chance, a dilapidated rowboat that was there on the shore. And they told her, "Ma'am, you have to take it from here. We can't go any further." And she made it across to the other side, which was the state of Illinois, which Illinois was a free state. After the slaves were freed by Abraham Lincoln, there really was no program of assimilation or acclimation for freed slaves to get into mainstream society. And for a while, Tolton wasn't going to school at all. Until one day, an Irish priest by the name of Father Peter McGurr saw this black boy across the street standing there looking, staring at the church. And he looked kind of hungry, so he gave him some food and found out where he lived. And was talking to Tolton's mother and said, "You know, this boy really should be in school." So she told him the story that she had him in school, but nobody would keep the kid into the school because he was black, that kind of thing. So Father Peter McGurr said, "Bring him to my school. And if anybody has any problem with it, they'll have to deal with me." It was in the midst of him going to school there and then being what we would call today a religion teacher or a catechist that the sisters and the priests noticed that he might have a religious vocation. Others thought they were I think they were kind of forward-thinking priests and sisters, socially minded. And they seemed to think that if black Catholics would get anywhere, they certainly needed their own clergy. And these people began praying and writing, looking for some niche in a seminary where he might go. So they tried writing to different seminaries to see if they would take him. But no one would take a black student in those days. Institutions, by and large, were not open to blacks. It wasn't understood that blacks could be educated. After receiving all these no's, it was over about 7 or 8 years, the Franciscan fathers came up with an idea to see if they could get him in the seminary in Rome. After a little over a year, they got the answer finally that he was accepted. He got on a train, took him to New Jersey. From New Jersey, took a ship to France. From France, and trains down to Italy. And he was there. So in the midst of his studies, he was studying the continent of Africa. He was even picking up a couple dialects from other African students who were his classmates and that. And that's what he was settled upon, that he probably would never go back home again and then go to Africa as a priest. It's one of the interesting turning chapters in his life of how everything changed. The night before he was ordained a priest, the cardinal prefect of the propaganda, a man by the name of Giovanni Simeoni, took Tolton aside and told him, "You know, the vote was to send you to Africa after your ordination. And he had already taken that oath, I think at least a year or two before. But the cardinal said, I overturned that decision. We're going to send you back home to the United States to be a missionary there. He was ordained on the Easter Vigil of 1886 with his class, and then in July he was on his way back to Quincy. Tolton was a news sensation simply because he was black. No one had ever seen a Roman collar on the neck of a black man before.
You know, he was apparently a very good preacher, and that teaches all of us that the good preaching is a source of huge encouragement in the church.
So Father Augustus Tolton's going back to his home country was a wise decision. Thank God that Cardinal said that and did that, because it changed the face of the church.
You know, I don't think there's any place in the United States where there would be resistance on the part of bishops to vocations from any ethnic group. And those days are done. And they had a beginning somewhere, and the beginning in terms of the African American community at least was Augustus Tolton. And so whether people know his name or not, they're blessed by his decision, as the church is blessed by his decision.
I think any African American priest, any African American person in general, can see in Father Tolton resilience, joy, service. All those are tied together to his story. And it certainly has touched my life, because as I came back to my community, you know, I felt a sense of joy and acceptance from the people, and a responsibility to call forth in them their gifts.
In general, I think most young people today are heroically committed if they decide to go to the seminary, because there's very little in our culture that supports even thinking about something like that.
Living in this world is no easy assignment for any of us. The perseverance he amassed for himself in order to serve the church as a servant of God, as a priest, I think are tools that other people can learn from.
I think the difference, the encouragement that Father Augustus Tolton experienced, there were no African American priests or bishops at that time. So his encouragement came from those who were not African American. So it shows us that the church and support and love of the church goes beyond color. God calls all people and all men, different races. The response is not always there. So I always encourage them to pray for the gift of courage. Going back to Father Tolton again, he's a man that had tremendous obstacles. When I see a minister and young men, I encourage them and challenge them to consider this call.